Screen is too bright. That's why I'm glowing like this. So I'll just finish doing a couple things here. And then I'm just posting basically all the links to the stream. But if you're already here, then you're already here. Right? So because if the screen is like all bright, then like obviously the white screen will have you like glow. Just doing a mic test. Mic test. Mic test. Looks like sound is registering fine. It is 3:05, so let's start this thing. Hello and welcome to the stream. Parson reads The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood by Howard Pyle, at least this collection of it. Something I didn't mention when I was reading this last week was that obviously with a legend character, I guess we could say, like Robin Hood, and there's so many different variations of the character, and different writers and orators kind of telling the story in different ways. Since this is a more kiddish, a third grader level book, the book is very different from other versions of Robin Hood you might know. And so, for example, Robin Hood's main love interest, Maid Marian, is not at all in this version of Robin Hood. But if you read other versions, then obviously she would be a big character. And of course, another funny thing, I'll kind of point it out when we start reading, that there's actually we're introduced to an important character late in this book, whereas if you read other versions of Robin Hood, they might have this character introduced right away. So there are some funny little discrepancies when you have one character that has so many different authors over the years. So today we'll be reading the second half of Robin Hood. And we'll be starting chapter 12, and I think it goes to like 21 or something like that, which is basically the end of the book. And chapter 12 introduces a character that would be well known in the Robin Hood canon. But it's kind of funny how this book actually introduces this character pretty late. And that is Alan a Dale. So chapter 12, Alan a Dale. There's a picture. I'll just start off with the picture. And it's Robin and his guys are just kind of planning their next adventure. And they're just kind of sitting around. And I guess not much has been happening in Sherwood Forest. So 2 days have passed. The morning was bright, and the dew still lay on the grass. Robin Hood sat under the greenwood tree. On one side lay William Scarlet, gazing up into the sky with his hands behind his head. On the other side sat Little John, making a new staff out of an oak branch. Many others of the band sat or lay nearby. Robin spoke first. No one has dined with us for a long time now. Therefore our purse is low. Good Stuteley, choose 6 men and go to Fawsey Way. Bring someone with a heavy purse to eat with us, and we will prepare a grand feast. Take Will Scarlet with you, for he should learn the ways of the forest. I'm trying to remember the voice I gave this guy. Was Will Stutley... Did I get Will Stutley the annoying voice? I gave Will Stutley the annoying voice, didn't I?
I choose Midge the Miller, and Arthur at Bland also,
said Will.
For they are tough fighters with a staff. Is it not so, Little John?
Everyone laughed except Little John and Robin, who said, I can speak for Midge and my cousin Scarlet. This very morning, I look at my ribs, and they are all shades of purple and blue. Will Stuteley and his band set forth to Fosse Way. Many travelers passed there, unaware of the 7 strong fellows who lay hidden in the thicket. But no rich esquire, tacksman, or a fat abbot came by. No one whose purse might be emptied, and the band waited the entire day.
What bad luck,
said Stuteley.
Come, lads, let us return.
So they all turned their toes back to Sherwood. Here's a picture of the boys. Sorry, this wrong side. The picture of the boys just waiting to find, some passerby so they can take their money, basically. After a time, Will Stuteley, who was in the lead, stopped.
Listen, lads,
he whispered.
I think I hear a sound, for truly I have ears like a fox.
And they all heard a faint and melancholy sound, like someone weeping. Someone will need our help, said Will Scarlet. He walked towards the sound. In a clearing in the woodland, they found a pool. By the side of the pool, beneath a willow, stood a youth weeping aloud. His golden curls were tangled, and his clothes were wrinkled. He looked full of sorrow and woe. Over his head in the branches of the willow hung a beautiful harp of polished wood, inlaid with gold and silver. Beside him laid an ashen bow and 10 fine smooth arrows.
Hello,
shouted Will Stuteley.
Who are you, lad, and why are you standing here killing all the green grass with the salt water of your tears?
Here's a picture of this young lad. He's crying by a riverside with his bow and, of course, his harp hanging in the tree. This poor fellow here looks so sad. Hearing the voice, the lad sprang up to his bow and quickly fitted an arrow to it. I know that lad, said one of the yeomen. He is a minstrel. I saw him only a week ago. He was happy and gay then.
Huh,
cried Stuteley.
Wipe your tears, man. I do hate to see a tall, strong fellow sniveling like a girl of 14.
But Will Scarlet saw how the stranger had a young boyish face and was hurt by Stuteley's words. Will Scarlet came to him and put his hand on the shoulder's youth. Do not mind these fellows, he said kindly. They are rough, but they mean well. Perhaps they do not understand a lad like you. Come with us. we may be able to help you.
Truly,
Said Stuteley gruffly.
I mean no harm. We will be good to you. Take down your heart from the tree and come away with us into Sherwood Forest.
Here's a picture of William Scarlet offering to help the young man. As Will knows the subtler approach and how to speak with compassion. The youth walked beside Will Scarlet with a bowed head and sorrowful steps. Everything was still as the sun set, except for the forest's night sounds and the men's feet on the dry, crisp leaves of last winter. The little band moved across the glade. The air was filled with the sweet smell of good things cooking. Many yeomen turned and watched them as they arrived, but not one of them questioned. With Will Scarlet on one side and Will Stuteley on the other, the lad came to where Robin Hood sat with Little John beside him. Are you not the great Robin Hood? He asked. Robin was pleased that the lad knew of him, but frowned at Stuteley when he learned that the lad had no money. Then Will Scarlet spoke up, saying that the youth was in need. Robin looked at the lad closely. You have a young, kind face, he said. A good face. At Robin's kind words, the lad's eyes brimmed with tears. Oh, I should show the picture. I had to turn the page a little bit there just to finish that sentence. But here's a picture of, the guys approaching Robin Hood and Little John. With the musician. I mean, if it isn't obvious who the musician is, even though his name has not been brought up yet, like via the text, only in the chapter title. But there you go, it's Robin and the gang, and they meet this young lad. Robin sent the other men away, asking only William Scarlet and Little John to stay. Then the lad explained his sadness. Oh, the girl I love, the fair Ellen, is to be married in 2 days to an old knight. She loves me, but it is her father's wish. Robin quickly thought of a plan, but he needed a friar he could trust to help him. Will Scarlet said he knew a brave friar who lived only a half-day's walk. Robin planned to begin the journey at dawn. The lad dried his eyes, and a merry feast was held. They asked him to sing for them. Not a sound broke the stillness as the lad sang. So sweet was his voice and his music. Robin shook his hand and asked him his name. It is Allen a Dale, came the reply. Then Will Scarlet gave his hand in fellowship, as did Little John. And so the famous Allen a Dale became one of Robin's band. And here's a picture of Allen a Dale just playing some music for the group. You gotta point out how it's a little bit funny that, these guys, they like just meet Robin Hood. And I mean, he's known in the Nottinghamshire district, I guess you could say. Like, he's pretty well known. And Robin's just like, yo, you want to join my group? And they're like, okay. Like, don't these other guys have, like, other lives they have? I mean, I guess back then it was not easy to make living, right? So, and a lot of these guys would actually be pretty poor anyway. But to live away from, like, the corrupt nobility of the Nottinghamshire, I guess it would be pretty easy to just be like, yeah, we're just gonna join Robin Hood's band. Like, see you later, right? Anyway, that's the end of chapter 12. Alan Adale joins the party. I like how the book even points out he's like a more known character because he's the famous Alan Adale. And usually, I mean, it makes sense that he would be one of the more famous members because the idea is that since, you know, a lot of these tales would be passed on by song, you know, a bard's tale, quote unquote, then more than likely Alan Adale may be the original, you know, transcriber of the stories of Robin Hood, if you will, right? Because I mean, the idea is that, okay, so most of these stories would have been told orally, right? And the best way of doing that was doing it via campfire songs, kind of thing, right? Campfire stories and stuff like that. And so, you know, a troubadour or a bard was the way you kind of communicated these things. And so, more often than not, you know, in these stories, there's that one member who's the musician. And the popular idea is that it's that character who carries on the story, right? Because he's the one who goes around, he sings the songs, you know, wherever he goes, because that's what bards do to make a living. And then that's how the stories get continued, right? I mean, that's kind of the tradition. Whether, you know, Robin Hood was an actual person isn't relevant, right? Or Alan Adale for that matter. But the idea of the characters, right? The idea of the bard who joins the group makes sense if you understand the way that the bard would be the one who maintains the story and passes it out. Wow, I can't talk today. Passes it on, right? Alrighty. Chapter 13. Robin seeks the friar. The next morning, Robin put on a fine steel coat of chainmail and covered it with a jacket of Lincoln green. His steel cap was hidden by one of white leather with a cock plume. The great bluish blade of his sword was marked all over with strange figures of dragons and winged women and whatnot. So he's got like a pretty fancy sword. Just this way, he and Little John, Will Scarlet, David of Doncaster, and Arthur of Bland set forth, leaving Will Stutely to be chief while Robin was gone. Oh, here's a picture of Robin Hood putting on that knight armor. Because Robin Hood gets to be a knight today. So the band strode along mile after mile. Will led, for he knew the way better than others. In the hot silence of midday, they came to the banks of a wide, glassy stream. Swallows flew around them and over the water's surface, and gay dragonflies darted here and there, glistening in the sun. "Now, good uncle," said Will Scarlet after they had walked for a time beside the sweet bright river, "just beyond the bend before us is a shallow place to cross. On the other side of the stream lives the Friar of Fountain Dale." Robin asked his yeoman to wait for he wanted to go on this adventure alone. Little John grumbled at this, but the men sat down. Robin turned and left them. Robin had walked just out of sight of his men when he stopped, for he thought he heard voices. And before we go into those voices, here's the picture. It's a picture of Robin going off on his own, and the other guys are just kind of camped out somewhere for a while. Basically, they just wait for Robin or his bugle horn if he needs their help. Oops. There you go. So Robin's over here, and he's walking off, and these other guys are just kind of sitting around. Now words seemed to pass between the two men, but the voices were almost identical. Curious, Robin walked softly to the river, lay down on the grass, and peered over the edge. All was cool and shady beneath the bank. And there sat a friar, with shoulders as broad as Little John's, merry gray eyes, and a curly black beard. He was eating a meat and onion pie and talking to himself, then answering himself as if he were another man. Robin lay watching the friar, and when the friar began to sing, Robin joined in merrily. Then he leapt down the bank to where the friar sat. Sorry, I'm just trying to picture a voice for my head here. Do you know this country, good and holy man? Asked Robin, laughing. See, now it's kind of... I'm like, what should I give this friar? You know, this big guy. Be like, yes, a bit, said the friar. Do you know a spot called Fountain Abbey? Yes. Do you know the friar of the abbey? Yes, a bit, came the answer. Here's a picture of that friar. Now you're probably thinking, like, my voice does not match the voice I'm giving the friar, but let's just work with it. So there's Robin up here, like, just peeping on the dude as the dude talks to himself while he's eating. Just having a grand old time, I'm sure. Now Robin did not like the idea of getting his pretty clothes wet by crossing the river. So he asked the strong friar to take him across his back. Sorry, to take him across on his back. At first the man was angry, saying, Do you dare ask me, the holy tuck, to carry you? But suddenly he paused. His eyes twinkled, and he said he would carry Robin across. When they reached the middle of the river, where the water was deepest, the friar stopped. Then, with a sudden lift of his hand and heave over his shoulders, he shot Robin over his head like a sack of grain and into the water with a mighty splash. Here's a picture of the friar stopping in the middle of the river right before he throws Robin into the water. And they made like the friar a pretty big guy. I mean, when they describe him as having like broad shoulders like Little John, I mean, obviously this friar is he's no shrimp. That's for sure. When Robin reached the bank again, their swords flashed in the sun and met a clash that sounded far and near. They fought for over an hour, but neither man harmed the other. Hold! Shouted Robin, wiping the sweat from his brow. He thought it would be a terrible thing if he would wound this brave fellow, or was wounded himself. Will you let me blow on my bugle horn? He asked. The friar nodded and watched for what Robin might call. When he saw 4 tall men in Lincoln green, each with an arrow ready in his bow, he reached for a pretty silver whistle that hung with his rosary. He blew a loud, shrill blast, as a knight would call a hawk, and 4 gray, shaggy hounds ran at Robin. Robin dropped his sword and leapt into a tree. Oh, here's the picture of the friar, and he uses the rosary whistle, and he calls a bunch of pack dogs over here, as you can see. So he's got his little rosary whistle thing, and the pack dogs, they come out. You just don't see Robin's guys, but I guess it's not really relevant. Then the hounds attacked the yeomen. All but Will Scarlet let their arrows fly. The dogs caught the arrows in their mouths and bit them in two. The men would certainly have been in trouble if Will Scarlet had not stepped forth and called the dogs down. When they heard his voice, they licked his hands and barked. "What is this?" cried the friar. "Do I see young Master Gamwell here with such men?" "No, Friar Tuck," said the young man. "I am called Will Scarlet now, and this is my Uncle Robin Hood." Robin jumped down from the tree. He was surprised to find that this friar was the friend of Scarlet's that he had been seeking. The friar was more surprised to find that Master William was one of the yeomen, and that the man he had dropped in the river was Robin Hood. "What do you need of me?" Sorry, "What do you need of me?" asked the friar. "The day grows late. We cannot talk here. Come back with us to Sherwood, and I will tell you as we travel." So they all departed with the dogs at their heels. It was long past nightfall before they reached the greenwood tree. So here's a picture of all the guys going back to Sherwood. Whoops. Awkward angling. With the friar front and center. And they all go back to Sherwood Forest now that they've achieved their objective of finding a friar. Chapter 14. The Outlaws Go to Church. The day had come when fair Ellen was to be married, and Robin had sworn that she would marry only Allen a Dale. So Robin had left Will Scarlet as chief, and had taken Little John, Will Stutely, and several of his loyal men with him to the small church. Which begs the question, though, if Ellen's father, and yes, I can be really confusing, right? Allen a Dale and his girlfriend's name is Ellen. But anyways, if Ellen's dad's main interest was to have his daughter marry for money, wouldn't these guys have gone to a bigger cathedral or something? Not just some shabby little church on like the countryside where you could easily have a bunch of bandits going to. Like, come on. Are you serious? This dad, real dad of the year right here, right? Doesn't even do that part right. Anyway, Robin had dressed himself as a minstrel in red, yellow, and green. Ribbons and streamers hung all around him. Now he and his men were resting in the cool shadow of a wall after their long walk. He had sent David of Doncaster. Excuse me. Oh, I didn't show the picture yet. I'll just read that sentence again, but here's a picture of the guys waiting at that wall. They're kind of waiting. It's probably like high noon or something, so they're probably like, resting in the shadows. Just kind of catching a breather after walking all morning. Now Robin had sent David of Doncaster to watch the road from the top of the wall. And after a time he asked, "Young David, what do you see?" "I see white clouds and 3 black crows flying." Silence fell again and time passed. Robin grew impatient and asked again, and David answered, "I see windmills swinging and poplar trees swaying." So more time passed, till at last Robin asked young David once more what he saw. And David said, "I see how the wind makes waves in the barley field, and now over the hill comes an old friar to the church door." Then Allan a Dale shook Friar Tuck, who lay snoring by the wall. Robin knelt by Tuck and said, "Now go, get yourself inside that church. Little John, Will Stutely, and I will follow you shortly." So here's a picture of David of Doncaster, and he's just keeping watch. Checking the road and probably making his reports about what he sees. That's David Doncaster. When Tuck had introduced himself to the old friar and been led inside the church, Robin took up his harp and sat beside the door. Little John and Stutely took the bags of gold Robin had brought and went inside. The wedding party came closer, and Robin could recognize them. The first was the rich Bishop of Hereford. Hereford? Hereford. I always say Hereford because it's like spelled H-E-R-E, like the word here, and then Ford, like F-O-R-D. So is it Hereford, or are you supposed to like modify its pronunciation just because you now put them into a compound word? Like, could it be Hereford? I didn't actually get this pronounced checked. I'm going to say Hereford because I think that's how it's actually pronounced. Anyway, the Bishop of Hereford on a fine horse, which means he's rich. Then came the bishop's cousin, Sir Stephen, the groom. Then Ellen's stout father, and fair Ellen herself. Ellen was pale and sad as she walked slowly into the church. The bishop stopped and asked Robin who he was. "I am a harper," said Robin, "and I will play so sweetly this day that this fair bride will love the man she marries as long as they both live." If you do, said the bishop, "I will give you whatever you ask." Robin smiled to himself. He planned to take some of that bishop's money that day anyway, without the bishop asking. So he strode forward with his ribbons. Oh, sorry. Here's the picture of Robin meeting the bishop as he plays a harp next to the door. So Robin strode forward with his ribbons fluttering and stopped the wedding. His men, led by Allan a Dale, filled the church. Sir Stephen grew angry and insulted and left the church. When Robin offered Ellen's father the 2 bags of gold as a dowry, he could do little but accept it, for he realized that she would marry Allan with his consent or without it. Then Friar Tuck stepped forward and gave Ellen's hand to Allan a Dale, who stood dizzy with happiness. The friar read the wedding service, and they were wed. Robin had played his part, and now asked the bishop for the heavy gold chain he wore about his neck. The bishop's cheeks grew red, and his eyes flashed, but he handed Robin the chain. Robin flung it over Ellen's head. See, you already get that whole like Ellen and Allan thing and getting them mixed up. It just happened. So Robin flung it over Ellen's head so that it hung glittering on her shoulders. Here's a picture of basically the wedding taking place. So you got front and center, Allan and Ellen. And the friar at the bottom here doing all the services. And of course, all the men of Sherwood, or not all of them, but you know, the crew, if you will, in the background, all supporting Allan a Dale. Because they all became friends with him pretty quick. But I suppose in Allan's favor, I mean, he's supposedly like this good looking, he's smart, he's a musician, and he's probably like a very friendly guy. So no doubt he would have made fast friends with the guys in Sherwood. I thank you for your handsome gift, Robin said with a bow to the bishop. And if you are ever near Sherwood, I hope you will join us in a feast. The bishop scowled, for he knew what kind of feast Robin Hood gave the rich in Sherwood Forest. Then Robin gathered his men together, with Allan and Ellen in their midst. And they all turned their footsteps toward the woodlands. That night there was a greater and grander feast in Sherwood than there had ever been in all of Nottinghamshire. Friar Tuck asked Robin if he could join the band as their chaplain. Robin and the rest laughed, and they knew that the friar loved his beer and the merry life. And they were pleased to have him. So Friar Tuck joined the band and lived for many days near the greenwood tree. And here's a picture of Allan and Ellen just being super happy. The friar also being pretty happy with the drinks. And the merry band in the background as they all celebrate Allan and Ellen's wedding. How nice. Chapter 15. A friar's life and a beggar's life. Cold winter had passed and spring had come. Robin sat on a deer's hide in front of the greenwood tree, with his hands clasped about his knees. He lazily watched as Little John rolled a bowstring from strands of hempen thread, wetting his palms and rolling the cord on his thigh. Nearby sat Allan a Dale, fitting a new string to his harp. Here's a picture of basically that. Robin sitting on the deer hide with his hands on his knees. Little John with that bowstring. Although that's a mighty big bowstring. And of course, Allan a Dale putting a musical string on his harp. So the three of them just kind of working and hanging out. Sherwood Woods business. As Little John rubbed his new bowstring with yellow beeswax, he and Robin talked of the merry days they had spent at the Blue Boar Inn that past winter, and of many people they had met. They began wondering which of these people led the best life. Little John said that if he were not a yeoman, he would be a traveling friar. And Friar Tuck sang a song in his rich, mellow voice, telling of the life of the traveling friar. He made it seem a good life. Now Robin said it was a good song, but he thought that beggars told merrier tales and led a merrier life. What do you say to this adventure, this fair day, Little John? Suggested Robin. Take a friar's gown from our chest of spare clothes, and I will stop the first beggar I meet and change clothes with him. Then we will wander the country and see what happens to each of us. Little John agreed, and he went to the band's storehouse and chose a friar's robe for himself. When he came back, the rest of the men laughed at him, for the robe was much too short. Here's a picture of just that. Little John putting on the friar gown and other people laughing at him, because as you can see, it's pretty short. There was no beggar's costume in the chest, so Robin took money to buy some beggar's clothes for himself. Little John and Robin walked down the forest path until they came to the highway, and they separated at the first fork, with Robin taking the road to Gainsborough, and Little John the road to Blyth. "Farewell, Holy Father," cried Robin, "and may you have no need to pray for your life before we meet again." And Little John answered, "Good day, beggar, and may you have no need to beg for mercy before I see you again." That night in Sherwood, the red fires glowed brightly, making shadows in the trees and bushes. The brave fellows of the band lay around to hear Robin and Little John tell of their day's adventure. First, Little John told of his meeting with 3 lasses. Oh wait, sorry, I should not read that part yet. Here's a picture of Robin and Little John splitting ways. They go on 2 different paths. One to Gainsborough and the other to Blyth. So first, Little John told of his meeting with 3 lasses, of their merry walk to market, and of the kiss he gave each lass when he left them. Then Robin told him how he met a beggar under a lime tree, and how he bought the man's clothes. Next, Little John told of the tinker, the beggar, and the peddler, who paid for all the ale he could drink at a small inn alongside the road. And Robin told of his adventures with 4 beggars. One who pretended to be deaf, but had heard his steps. The one who pretended to be blind, but had seen him first. One who pretended he could not speak, but had shouted a welcome. And the one who pretended to be lame, but had stood up and moved to let Robin sit down. Those are like some of the worst beggars ever. Then he described the fight that began when the beggars found that he didn't know the secret words all beggars knew. It was a fight Robin had won, and he had the beggars' money to prove it. Here's a picture of Robin meeting those 4 beggars. If it's not easy to see, the 4 beggars are one over here, one here, one here, and one down here. So those are 4 beggars. And Robin's just kind of sitting, hanging out with them, I guess. When Little John told of the 2 gray friars who said they had no money to give him for food, then he opened his hands and showed the band the money the friars had in their pouches when he looked there. Robin matched this story with one about the rich corn merchant who cheated the poor. Robin had told the merchant that he was dressed as a beggar to fool the thief. Robin Hood. The wicked merchant then told him that he had hid all his money in his shoe for that very same reason. Robin ended his story by holding up 2 shoes that he had taken from the rich merchant. Everyone listened closely to the stories, and the words rang with laughter. Some thought the friar's life was best, and some thought the beggar's life was best. And here's a picture of Robin after stealing the rich merchant's shoes. Chapter 16. King Henry's archery match. The high road stretched white and dusty in the hot summer afternoon sun. 16-year-old Richard Partington, the Queen's page, rode along a milk-white horse, and his long cloak flowed behind him. He wore silk and velvet, with jewels flashing and a dagger jingling against the front of his saddle. He had been riding since dawn on the hot, dusty road, and was pleased to come to the cool, shady inn, bearing the sign of a blue boar. Here's a picture of this Richard Partington, this young page, which is basically like a messenger boy. Yeah, that's a way of putting it. He's an envoy, basically. He's got his fancy horse, he's got his fancy clothes, and his cool little knife sitting there. Can't see it. This cool little knife. There he is, Richard Partington. the Queen's page, which means he's like a pretty high position. Five men sat drinking ale under a large oak tree. Two were dressed in Lincoln green. One was the tallest, stoutest man Partington had ever seen. The other was a handsome fellow with a sunburnt face and curly nut-brown hair. The innkeeper brought the page his wine and handed it up to him from his saddle. From his saddle, Partington toasted Queen Eleanor and Robin Hood, whom he was seeking. Hearing this, two of the yeomen whispered to each other. Then the tall one said, "Surely it is safe to take him to Robin." In the cool shade of the greenwood tree, Robin and many of the band lay on the soft green grass and listened while Alan a Dale sang and played upon his sweet-sounding harp. There came a sudden sound of horses' feet. Little John and Will Stutely came riding in with young Richard Partington between them. So here's a picture of Little John and Will Stutely as they're drinking, and there's Richard Partington in the background. And they're, he meets them at the Blue Boar Inn. Now Robin Hood stood up to meet him, and young Partington leapt from his horse, taking with him a small velvet box. "Welcome," cried Robin, "and what brings one in such noble dress to our poor forest of Sherwood?" Young Partington told them of King Henry's grand shooting match in London town, and of the Queen's wish that Robin come and take the prize. That's an oddly strange request. She had sent a golden ring from her thumb as a token of her goodwill and her promise that Robin would be protected from arrest if he came. Robin Hood kissed the ring and slipped it on his little finger. "I will do our Queen's bidding and go with you to London." I'm just thinking of a voice for Richard here. We have no time to waste," said the page. "We only have 4 days to make our long journey." "And I will choose 3 men to go with me," said Robin. "Little John, my right-hand man, Will Scarlet, family, and Alan a Dale, my minstrel." Okay, here's a picture of Robin kissing the Queen's ring. Will Stutely shall be chief while I'm gone. They were a fine sight as they rode into London town. Robin was dressed in blue. Little John and Will Scarlet were dressed in Lincoln green, and Alan a Dale was in scarlet from the top of his head to the pinpointed shoes. Why Will Scarlet is not the one wearing scarlet is the real question. Each man wore a head cap of polished steel and a coat of linked mail under his jerkin. Robin Hood, Little John, Will Scarlet, and Allan a Dale kneeled before the Queen in the royal garden room. Great floods of golden sunshine poured in through the windows, and the air smelled of sweet red roses from the beautiful garden below. Here is a picture of the four men kneeling before the Queen. Kind of hard to tell which knight. Well, I mean, I think one of them. You can tell which one Little John is. Well, I mean, this one's probably Robin, and this one's probably Will Scarlet, and then Little John's in the back. Allan a Dale is kind of the ambiguous looking one here. That's my guess. I mean, you can tell Robin Hood and Little John, because Little John's the big guy in the back, and Robin has his little goatee. After a rich feast, the Queen asked them to tell of their adventures. And they told her every story they could remember. Good reason for bringing Allan a Dale. And the Queen and her ladies in waiting laughed again and again. Then Allan sang for them, and so the time passed until the hour of the great archery match. Bright flags fluttered in the breeze for each band of royal archers, and silken streamers of red, white, green, and blue hung from the crowded galleries. 6 trumpeters entered the field. Velvet banners worked in silver and gold threads hung from their silver trumpets. So you can tell this is a big deal. Behind them came King Henry and Queen Eleanor. Then came the court, and the field was full of color. The Queen made a bet with the King. She said she knew 3 archers who could outshoot the King's best men. The crowd stood to see who the men could be. No one knew the men, except the Bishop of Hereford, who stood by the Queen. He gasped. Even though Robin Hood called himself Locksley, after the town where he was born, the bishop still recognized him. Here's a picture of... I'm assuming that's the king. That's the queen. Here's that bishop guy. And here's Robin Hood as he approaches the shooting match. And the bishop recognizes him. Now there were 800 archers in all. So many arrows were shot that the targets looked like porcupines. Even with a rematch, no man could outshoot Locksley and the 2 men in Lincoln Green. When the tournament was over, the yeomen of the King's Guard and many of the crowd gathered around the strangers. While Robin was talking to Gilbert, the King's best archer, another plucked him by the sleeve and said, "Richard Partington sends this message from a certain lady. The lion growls. Beware your head." Now Robin knew the message came from the Queen, and it meant that the King was angry. It was now dangerous for them to stay. So he called the 3 men together. And unfortunately, the problem with books like this is that there's a little lack of proofreading, as yeoman is spelt wrong. Right there. So Robin called his 3 yeomen together. Without further delay, they pushed through the crowd and left London, heading northward. And here's a picture of that knight giving Robin Hood the message, "Beware your head." And so Robin and his guys have to run back to Sherwood as fast as they can to not get, executed in the king's fury. The knight's a nice guy, though. Chapter 17. Robin escapes capture. The great moon floated in the sky. The 4 fellows walked the road like 4 shadows. They came to an inn, and Robin suggested they stay the night. "We are still very near London, Uncle," said Will Scarlet. Nevertheless, they entered the inn. As they ate, Little John winked at the young lass who served them. During the meal, the landlord came to the table and said that Richard Partington wished to see the lad in blue. Dun dun dun! Oh, here's a picture of the 4 guys walking around at night, trying to just be darkened figures on the road. Robin rose quietly and went outside. The Bishop of... Oh, sorry. The Bishop of Hereford has turned the king against you, said Partington. The king sent men to arrest you at the archery fields, but you had gone. Now, he has 1,000 men on this road to take you. The bishop leads them, and he has sworn to hang you. The queen sent me to warn you. I will go one way tonight, and send my friends another, said Robin, and I will let the landlord think we are all going to St. Albans. You have saved my life again, Richard Partington. I will not forget this. Farewell, sir, said young Partington. Go safely. The 2 shook hands, and the lad turned his horse back to London. Here's a picture of Richard Partington coming to give Robin that warning. It's hard to keep my hands stable. The yeoman left the inn. Now, said Robin, be sly. Will Scarlet, you shall lead. Then Robin shook hands with his 3 friends, and they parted. Not long after this, 20 of the king's men rode to the door of the inn. The innkeeper told the king's men that Robin Hood and his men were riding at St. Albans. Will Scarlet, Allan a Dale, and Little John reached Sherwood in 8 days with no trouble. But Robin was not at the greenwood tree when they arrived, for he had not been as lucky as they were. When the bishop found he had been tricked at St. Albans, he took all his men and blocked every road into Sherwood. The sheriff of Nottingham joined the army, because it's been a while since we've heard from that guy. But this time, the 3 yeomen were safe. But Robin was still a day's journey from Sherwood, unaware of the danger all around him. As he knelt by a stream drinking from his cupped hands, something hissed past his ear and splashed into the water beside him. Quick as a wink, Robin sprang to his feet, crossed the stream, and plunged into the thicket. He knew it was an arrow that had passed his head, and he would be dead if he did not run. Here's a picture of Robin Hood at the riverside there. And he was getting a quick drink, but now people are shooting at him. Ooh. 6 more arrows rattled after him, and one would have wounded him badly, but it struck his coat of steel. 7 men came after him, but Robin knew the ground better than they, and he soon left them far behind. He had gone a mile when he saw another band of the king's men over a hill. Before they could see him, he turned and ran back the way he had come. He ran mile after mile until he could run no more. As Robin rested in a hedge, Quince, the cobbler, came by. Robin offered to trade his own fine blue clothes for Quince's rough patched jerkin. Quince thought this was a merry idea, even when the king's men found him and arrested him because they thought he was Robin Hood. The good old bait and switch. Here's a picture of Robin Hood running around the forest with the king's men looking for him. Robin was so tired, just like me. Okay, maybe way more than me. He was so tired that he couldn't walk any further. A storm was coming, and he decided to spend the night in an inn. Rooms were shared in small inns, and where Robin awoke the next morning, he found a friar snoring next to him. He put on the friar's gown and left the inn. And this is why personal hotel rooms are so important. In the afternoon, Robin met Sir Richard of Lee, a knight he had helped some years before when Sir Richard had tried to visit Sherwood, but was turned away. The sheriff's men were now in front of him, and the king's men were behind him, and they all knew of his disguise. Robin's heart sank, for he had no place to hide. Sir Richard offered to help. He took Robin to his castle and disguised him as one of his men, and brought him to Queen Eleanor to ask for her protection. The queen was indeed surprised when Robin dropped lightly to the ground inside the garden wall. But she went directly to the king and pleaded for his life. So basically Robin had to go all the way back after traveling like 9 days. So he spent like basically an extra week, because now we have to also account for the time it takes him to get back to Sherwood. So Robin went all the way to Sherwood, then he had to run part way back, meets up with Richard. Richard then takes him back, and then Robin meets with the queen, And then after the queen pleads for Robin's life, he has to go back to Sherwood after that. So that's a major oof for this guy. Here's a picture of Robin jumping into that garden with the queen in it. So there's the queen and a couple of her consorts. Her entourage, more accurately. There's Robin Hood in a knight's outfit, pretending to be one of Sir Richard's men. Sir Robert, a friend of the Queen's, came to Robin and said, "If I were you..." Sorry, no, that's not what he said. Sir Robert said, "If it were not for the Queen, you would be a dead man. Let this danger teach you 2 lessons. First, be more honest. And second, be less bold in your comings and goings, or someday a trap will catch you. You have put your head in the angry lion's mouth and escaped. Do not try it again." The Queen returned with Edward Cunningham, the King's head page, and announced that the page would take Robin safely back to Sherwood and see that no harm came to him. 3 days later, they set out. They passed many of the King's men returning to London, but none of them stopped to question the 2 travelers. It was the Queen who had saved Robin. Robin Hood followed Sir Robert's advice and never went so far from Sherwood that he could not return easily and quickly. Here's a picture of Robin Hood just riding safely back to Sherwood, or I guess it says riding safely out of London. So Robin was granted freedom, but was warned you probably shouldn't travel very far anymore, considering his reputation that he's been building up for these number of years. Chapter 18. The Evil Guy of Gisborne. I think it says Guy. Because it's one of those things, is like, it could be Guy, like the guy could be French. This is like England after all, so France isn't that far. It is 1 boat ride away. But I think it would just be the evil Guy of Gisborne. But I'm going to call him Guy. It might be Guy of Gisborne. But I'm going to call him Guy of Gisborne. Because he's the evil guy of Gisborne. You know what I mean? A long time passed after the great shooting match, and much has happened. King Henry died, and King Richard came to the throne with adventures as daring as those of Robin Hood. But none of these changes reached quiet Sherwood Forest, and the band lived as they always had. One summer day, the birds singing wakened Robin. He woke Little John, and the 2 set off for an adventure. Little John took the road to the left, and Robin took the path to the right. Now the Bishop of Hereford and the Sheriff, I assume of Nottingham, had hired the evil Guy of Gisborne, a murderer and a thief, to capture Robin Hood. That has got to be like, in the Middle Ages, and there's always been there's a lot of this kind of thing. Like, just read Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales, right? But like, so many of these clergy guys, especially if they're higher ups, tend to be pretty corrupt. And so you gotta wonder, like, this bishop here, he must be a pretty awful guy if he's willing to hire a known murderer and thief just to catch a guy like Robin Hood. Like, sure, Robin Hood is a thief himself, and I get that you probably hold a grudge about getting conned by Robin Hood, but still, you wouldn't hire, like, you know, a dirty mercenary, right? If you want to send guys to get Robin Hood, you probably get like knights or something, right? Not a dirty assassin. But anyway, they promised a full pardon and £200 reward to this man who said he would kill his own brother for such money. So clearly, this Guy of Gisborne, not a good guy. Guy of Gisborne wore a horse's hide with the hair still on it. On his head, and I totally did not show that other picture, but I'll just keep describing Guy of Gisborne. On his head and over his face, he wore a horsehide hood with ears that stuck up like rabbit's ears. He carried a huge sword, sharpened on both edges, and a yew bow and a dagger. Robin came upon this black-hearted man suddenly as he walked along. Guy of Gisborne glared at him wickedly. He pushed back his hood and showed off his fierce black eyes, his hooked nose, and thin, cruel mouth. Robin returned his gaze without a smile. "You bloody villain," he cried. "Look at daylight for the last time." I'm going to show a couple pictures. First, we have the picture of Robin Hood waking up Little John. I forgot to show this earlier. I'm going to show it now. And here's the picture of Guy of Gisborne. And he meets Robin Hood. And this part of the book takes like a major tone shift, because like, well, it's one of those things too. It's one of those funny things now that I'm older and I've like worked extremely dangerous jobs. I kind of know this experience that Robin has here, where like Robin is generally a pretty nice guy, even against like people that he doesn't like, or more accurately, people who don't like him, right? So Robin is not a mean guy to like the Sheriff of Nottingham. But then he meets this Guy of Gisborne, and Robin Hood's straight up like, "You're gonna die today, right? You're gonna die today," because Robin understood that the moment he saw him, I'll explain to you what it is. And I've encountered this a couple of times and had a few brushes with death because of it. But there are people who will look at you, and there is that they will give you that "I will kill you" look, right? And I mean, if you work in any kind of like law enforcement, I mean, this is why you gotta feel bad for police all the time, because people probably give police officers look all the time, but it's the "I'm gonna kill you" look, and it's gonna be awesome when you're dead. That's the look. It's kind of like, I can't imitate the look because I guess it's hard to explain this, but you can't just conjure up this look, right? It's something that comes from your heart, and then you manifest it into your person, and it's more than just like a facial expression. You know, if you're one of those people that believe in like auras or something, it's kind of like an aura that people give off too. And like I've said, I've encountered this, right? And there's people that kind of look at you in a way, and you get that vibe, and they have this expression of "I'm gonna kill you, and it's gonna be good when you're dead," right? I've had this happen, and you know, I've had guys pull knives on me and stuff like this, and the reason why I'm able to actually protect myself is because I'm actually good at picking this up. I know me trying to explain it to you like this is not the best way of doing it, and it's one of those things that like you have to know people well enough. You have to understand how people look at other people, and study people to know when that look and that aura shows up, that some people will look at you and they're like, I'm going to kill you. And that might have happened here with Robin Hood and Guy of Gisborne. Because, sure, like, the sheriff may have tried to kill Robin Hood. But on the one hand, Robin is kind of understanding about the sheriff's case, right? Because with the sheriff, it's like, well, it might be part of his job. I'm going to do what I can to survive and break what laws I have to survive, because I don't want to die today. But there's a difference between, like, okay, the sheriff is kind of wanting to bring me to justice and hang me because it's his job. And Robin is not too harsh about that. But when you meet someone that's just like, hey, I'm here to kill you. And Robin's like, nope, not happening, right? And there's another thing too, right? I use the Sheriff of Nottingham as like a law person, right? Even though, yeah, he's kind of corrupt and everything like that. But, like, Robin understands that, and Robin knows that, like, when he sees the Sheriff of Nottingham, the sheriff is not this malicious person, right? The sheriff is just kind of he's not a nice guy, but the sheriff he's not so sinister as to just look for blood, if that makes sense, right? The sheriff isn't bloodthirsty and doesn't just want to kill Robin for the sake of it, right? Whereas Robin can see that in the Guy of Gisborne. And when you know that's going to happen and you kind of realize, okay, only one of us is going to walk away from this, you have to, if you can grasp that idea, you have to fully embrace it. And this is how I've somehow magically survived, this last year, right? When I've had those moments, it's like, okay, only one of us is walking out of this. Only one of us, right? Sure, I didn't kill the other guy, but I had to break something, right? I had to beat you pretty badly to make sure you didn't kill me, right? But it's basically the same idea of only one of us is walking out of this in one piece, right? And so when I was younger, I didn't quite understand it in the book and how that actually happened, right? That Robin actually had this resolve of, this is the last daylight you'll ever see, Guy of Gisborne. And when I was younger, I didn't quite understand that. But now that I'm older and, I have more life experience, and I've had a number of brushes with death, way more often than any one person should ever in their lifetime. I mean, ideally, nobody should ever have to go through that ever, right? But, I've hit like almost double-digit amount of times. So, more than double-digit, right? But more than enough times that it's like, okay, like, this is getting ridiculous, right? Like, nobody should have their life threatened that many times and have people look at them with the I'm gonna kill you look. But basically, Robin had this, like, he understood that the moment he saw Guy of Gisborne. And, that's the secret of life in a lot of ways, right? You have to know anytime someone gives you that look that they are gonna kill you. Because that's when you have to have that resolve. Because if you don't, you have a split second to resolve yourself to accept that, okay, only one of us is walking out of this. So I'm ready to kill you if I have to. And you have to have that resolve instantly. Because if you don't have that resolve that moment, and the other guy goes for you, that's it. Right? That's it. You could be dead. Right? And so it's just kind of interesting that in this book, I can explain this moment a lot better when Robin Hood sees the Guy of Gisborne and he basically announces to him, you're going to die today. And this is Robin Hood, a guy that's not known for being overly violent, right? Like, sure, they hunt animals with their bow and arrows, but, like, most of the time when they actually shoot people with their arrows, they never actually shoot to kill very often. Like, there was that one chapter, like, way back earlier in the story. Go watch last week's stream for the particular chapter. But basically, there's a part where they fight, like, some of the sheriff's men. And they wound them, but they don't actually kill any of them. At least that's what the text implies. And so this gives this idea that, sure, Robin and his guys are like thieves and all that, but they're not killers. right? They don't go around killing people all the time because they're not that bad of guys, right? But this evil guy of Gisborne must be so different, right? And how malicious he is. And continuing the text as perfectly as I just explained it, each man knew that either he or the other must die, and there would be no mercy shown. Their swords flashed. Soon the grass was trampled by their feet and sprinkled with Guy of Gisborne's blood. At last, Guy made a deadly stab at Robin. Robin stepped back lightly, but caught his heel in a root and fell heavily on his back. With a grin, Guy stabbed at Robin, but Robin caught the blade in his hand and pushed it aside. It cut into his palm, but gave him time to leap up and stab Guy below the sword arm and kill him. Robin wiped his sword and talked softly to himself. I'm sorry I killed the forester when I was a youth. But I'm glad I killed you, Guy of Gisborne. So here's a scene of Guy of Gisborne trying to make that kill on Robin. But of course, as we just read, Robin will be able to catch the blade in his hand. And then he, gets the upper hand on Guy of Gisborne and stabs him. I mean, this is a pretty interesting scene because Robin is very different here than he normally is, right? And of course, with that little statement that he has about showing regret that he killed the forester, the sheriff's cousin, and why he's an outlaw. He's sad about that to this day. But with this Guy of Gisborne, he's like, but good riddance, you're gone, right? You will not plague anyone else ever again. Kind of thing. So when Robin put on Guy's hair garment, bloody as it was, and picked up the other's sword and bow with his own, he pulled the hood over his face and set off to take revenge on the sheriff. Many hid away from him as he walked, for all were terrified by the Guy of Gisborne. Meanwhile, Little John had been taken prisoner by the sheriff and was now awaiting death by the hanging tree. This is how it happened. So Little John had met an old woman who was weeping bitterly, for the sheriff had taken her 3 sons to hang for killing a deer. Little John had a tender heart for the sorrows of others and wanted to help her. When she told him that the sheriff was only waiting for the return of the man he sent after Robin Hood, Little John hurried to disguise himself. Then, dressed as a friar, he went quickly to find the sheriff, for now he feared for Robin's life as well. He came to the oak tree where the 3 youths stood. The nooses were already around their necks. Little John asked if he could step up and hear the youths' confessions before they were hung. Here's a picture of Little John meeting the old lady, the widow. And Little John, being the nice guy that he is, wants to help her. John's hair and beard were white, and he walked and talked like an old man. The sheriff did not look hard at him, the sheriff looked hard at him, but did not recognize him. So Little John went to the lads and whispered in their ears, while slyly cutting their bonds. The sheriff and his men took no notice as Little John fitted an arrow to his bowstring. "Run! Run!" shouted Little John in a mighty voice. The youths flung their nooses from their necks and sped into the forest. Little John raised his deadly bow, but as he drew the arrow back, the bow split. Then the sheriff rode down and knocked him senseless. When his eyes were open, his hands and feet were bound, and he was dazed from the blow and sat leaning against a hanging tree. As he looked around him, his heart crumbled. And why is his heart crumbling? Well, this is pretty bad right here. Little John is sitting next to this hanging tree. There's the noose with his name on it. Little John all tied up. And another reason why his heart had crumbled, for before him stood the evil Guy of Gisborne, his clothes covered with blood, and Robin's bugle horn and bow in his hand. Tears rolled down Little John's brown cheeks, as he thought it would be good to die that day, since Robin had also been slain. But the sheriff clapped his hands for joy. Guy said he wanted to kill Little John as a reward, and he stepped boldly up to the huge man. "Peace, Little John," whispered Robin. "Could you not tell it was me under this hide?" Robin cut him free and threw back his hood and blew 3 loud blasts on his horn. When the sheriff saw this, he thought Robin was the devil himself. Neither he nor his men were brave enough to face Robin Hood and Little John when they were armed, so they turned their horses and fled. When Will Stutely and a dozen stout yeomen arrived, they found Robin and Little John alone and glad to be alive. And here's a picture of Robin freeing Little John. I'm just checking how much more there is. It's not. We're actually almost done this book. Chapter 19. King Richard comes to Sherwood. Now 2 months later, all Nottinghamshire was in a stir, for King Richard was coming to visit the sheriff. The stony streets decorated with colorful banners were full of townspeople and country folk. The king's procession rode into town with trumpeters and knights in armor, pages in silk and velvet, and men at arms. The king rode alongside the sheriff. He was a head taller, with golden hair and beard and eyes as blue as the sky. He wore a broad, heavy chain around his neck. And here's a picture of that procession. King Richard looking majestic. He's got his trumpeters behind him. The Sheriff of Nottingham is next to the king. And funnily enough, Robin Hood and his guys are just chilling out here in the background as the king rides into town. Robin Hood, Friar Tuck, Little John, Will Scarlet, Alan a Dale, Will Stutely, and others of the band were in the crowd that day, cheering the king. They loved him loyally because his deeds were so much like their own. At the great feast in the guild hall, the king asked the sheriff to tell him of Robin Hood. Both the sheriff and the Bishop of Hereford were silent. The young Henry of Lee, a favorite with the king, told the story of how Robin had once used the bishop's money to help Sir Richard of Lee, his father. Soon others were telling tales of Robin Hood's adventures. Here's a picture of the king listening to some stories. He appears to be thoroughly entertained of hearing stories of Robin Hood. You can see the sheriff and the bishop in the background. Not so much though. They don't look to be very happy. The king's happy, but not them. They're not happy. That night, the king's mind was still on Robin Hood. Sir Hubert of Bingham laughed and said, "It would not be so hard to meet the fellow, your majesty. If we dress as friars and carry full purses, no doubt we will meet and dine with him in Sherwood before the day is over." The king was pleased with the plan and set out early the next morning with 7 of his men. Only 7? Well, I guess if he had too many, it would be suspicious. But later in the day, when they were well within the forest, the king said, "I would give 50... I need an awesome voice for the king, because he's got to be this majestic figure, right? He's like, "I would give 50 pounds for something to drink now." Just as he spoke, a tall fellow with yellow hair and beard and merry blue eyes stepped out from the bushes and grabbed the king's bridle rein. "I must answer such a request, holy brother," said Robin. "We keep an inn nearby, and for 50 pounds we will give you a noble feast." He gave a shrill whistle, and 60 men joined him. There is no need for force," said the king sternly. "Here is my purse." "Hut, tut," said Robin. "What proud words! Are you the King of England to speak so? Here, Will, take his purse." Will Scarlet took the purse and counted the money. And here's King Richard in his friar disguise, and 7 of his guys in the background. Robin Hood right in the forefront of the drawing as he brings in the king's horse. And there's a nice hefty bag of money right here, though. Now Robin told Will to keep half of it and return the rest. When he asked the king to take off his hood, the king said he kept it on for religious reasons. And Robin pressed him no further. Little John had also taken 60 yeomen to bring back a rich guest, but had not yet returned. Friar Tuck sat with 40 strong men under the greenwood tree. Tuck welcomed the new friars, and they all drank to the health of King Richard, even the king himself. Here's a picture of that, actually. Picture of drinking to the health of the king. There's good old Richard in the center, just having a grand old time. There's Friar Tuck in the forefront here, meeting the other friars, and they're just having a grand old time. You know, drinks. Sounds lovely, right? Then it was time for sport. A target was set with a mark 4 fingers wide. So it's a pretty small mark. It's like this. It's pretty small. Any archer who missed the mark received a punch from Will Scarlet's fist, which I'm sure every guy dreaded because Will is probably like one of the strongest guys in the camp, right? I mean, this is a guy who could pull a tree out of the ground. Sure, it was a little tree, but still. Do you know a lot of people who can pull a tree, even a small one, out of the ground? With his bare hands, mind you. So first, David of Doncaster shot, and shot well. Midge the miller, and then Wat the tinker. All the band shot, some getting off free, and some getting a punch that left them on the grass, as I bet a punch from Will Scarlet would leave. The king watched Robin closely, hoping to persuade him to join his guards. It was Robin's turn, but his last arrow was feathered badly, and it missed the mark. Robin threw his bow to the ground in anger, and the band roared with laughter. "Come now, uncle," said Will Scarlet in his soft voice. "I have something for you." "No," said Robin. "I will take my beating from the tall friar instead of you, Will. And if the friar knocks me to the grass, I will return his money." King Richard tumbled Robin to the ground, and Will Scarlet was counting out his money, when Little John burst into the glade with Richard of Lee and 60 yeomen. I'm trying to think of a voice for Sir Richard, by the way. Because there's only so many voices I can do, right? So, "Gather your band and come with me," shouted Sir Richard of Lee. "The king is coming to the forest for you. Come to Castle Lee until this danger is past." Then his face suddenly grew pale, and he knelt before the tall friar, for he recognized him as the king. And here is a scene of Richard revealing himself, and the entire band bowing before the King of England. King Richard removed his hood, and all knelt before him. The king scolded Sir Richard for helping an outlaw hide, but softened when the knight and his son, Sir Henry of Lee, boldly stood by Robin, as he had stood by them once. This was the last night Robin Hood spent in Sherwood Forest for many years. Shh. For the king ordered Robin and his nephew, Will Scarlet, Little John, and Allan a Dale, his minstrel, to become part of his household in London town. A full pardon was given to each man, and the band became Royal Rangers. Shh! Cat, not right now. I'm reading. After a year or two at the court, Little John came back to Nottingham and lived near the forest. Will Scarlet returned to his home. Robin was made Earl of Huntingdon, and followed the king to many wars. Ellen a Dale and fair Ellen lived at court with Robin for all the years he served the king. But Robin Hood did return to Sherwood for one last great bout. And here's the picture of Robin Hood as he leaves Sherwood Forest, as he goes and becomes a royal ranger for the King of England. And you can see all the way over here, all the guys with Friar Tuck in front, all waving goodbye. I have a drink. I haven't drank in a while. Chapter 20. Robin Hood's death. King Richard died bravely on the battlefield, a lion-hearted king. So after a time, the Earl of Huntingdon, or Robin Hood as we call him, had a great longing to see his woodlands again. King John, who succeeded King Richard, let Robin go, but asked that he stay only 3 days in Sherwood. Robin and Allen a Dale left the same day, and as they traveled, they talked of familiar things. Here's a picture of Robin and Allen a Dale walking around. They go through Sherwood Forest, reminiscing of them good old days. Look, Allen, cried Robin. See the scar on that tree? That was the day your arrow missed a deer and stripped away a piece of bark instead. And we got caught in a storm and stayed in the old farmer's hut. Robin seemed to remember every stick and stone, every path he had walked with Little John, and every tree he had used as a target. At last, they came to the open glade and the greenwood tree. Neither man spoke. Robin looked about him. All was the same. Yet, so different. For the many busy fellows that had filled the glade were gone, and all was still. Robin's eyes filled with tears. He had his bugle horn over his shoulder, and he raised it to his lips. The notes went down the forest path, echoing until they faded away and were lost. Now Little John, who still lived near the forest, was out walking deep in thought when he heard the faint noises of a distant horn. He gave a great cry and ran straight through the trees. He ran and ran until he came to the glade, when he saw Robin. He hugged him so hard he picked him up off the ground. Oh, here's a picture of Robin Hood blowing that horn with my awesome sound effects. In a shower of snapping twigs, 7 royal rangers burst from the bushes, with Will Stutely at their head. Then two more came with Will Scathellock and Midge the Miller. Robin looked about and said, I swear I will never leave these woodlands again. I will forget Robert, Earl of Huntingdon, and be Robin Hood once more. King John was furious. He sent Sir William Dale and the Sheriff of Nottingham to capture Robin Hood, dead or alive. The sheriff died in the bloody battle, and Sir William was wounded, but Robin was not captured. However, he brooded so long over the deaths of many of his men that he came down with a fever. Here's a picture of Little John welcoming Robin back. Men thought fevers could be cured by taking a bit of blood. Because yeah, people used to think that back then. They were like, if I cut myself a little bit and let some blood bleed when I was sick, that would make me better. I don't know how people would have thought that was a thing. Because I mean, that would just make you anemic, and then you'd be basically screwed at that point. So I don't know why they thought this, but whatever. So Robin rode with Little John to his cousin, the prioress of the nunnery of Curleys, who was skilled at bloodletting. The prioress feared that the king would be angry if she helped Robin. So she locked Little John out of the nunnery and led Robin up a winding stone stair to a room in a high tower. There, she tied a cord around her cousin's arm, as if to bleed him. But instead, she cut a vein and then left him, locking the door behind her. Again and again, Robin called for help, but no one came. His cousin had betrayed him, and Little John couldn't hear him. Here's a picture of the prioress leading Robin Hood up this tower, I guess you could say. Robin feeling kind of weak that he has to be helped up the stairs. Robin bled and bled until he felt his strength slip away. He stood up weakly and leaned against the wall to reach his bugle. He blew 3 faint notes. Still, Little John heard them in the glade where he lay. Little John was mad with grief and fear. He lifted a huge stone post and rammed it at the bolted nunnery door. The door crashed open, and the frightened nuns ran away. Little John raced to the tower and forced the door open with his shoulders. His shoulder, I guess. You wouldn't use both your shoulders. You use one shoulder. He burst in and saw Robin, his face white and drawn, leaning against the gray stone wall. Little John picked him up and gently laid him on the bed. When he applied some bandages to stop the bleeding, he lifted Robin against his own strong shoulder so that he could see the woodlands through the window. He tried to cheer Robin, but Robin took Little John's rough brown fists in his white hands and said, "Dear friend, we will never walk in the forest together again." Little John was silent. Hot tears fell from his eyes. Here's a picture of Little John ramming that door down with the stone pillar. Robin chokingly asked Little John to string him his bow and fit a smooth arrow for him. "Little John, my friend, watch this arrow as I shoot, and dig my grave on the spot where it lands." Here's a picture of Robin making that request. There he is, just with the bow fitted. He's ready to take one last shot to mark his grave, and Little John is supporting him. "Dig my grave on the spot where it lands." And the last of Robin's strength flew from his body as the arrow sped from the bow. So Robin Hood died in the year 1247. Loud, sorrowful cries rose from the dark shadows of Sherwood Forest. But Robin Hood's yeomen lived long after him and handed these stories down of his brave deeds to their children. And these children handed it down to their children and to their children's children. The end. So this ends the reading of The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood by Howard Pyle. It's an old classic book. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And with that being said, I don't have a lot of other commentaries to say about this book. I mean, I don't really want to make a huge commentary on it. But, I just hope you guys enjoyed, listening to The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood. And with that being said, because I am now done this book, this will also be the end of the stream. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you guys will be back tomorrow as I, continue on and try and finish Tokyo Mirage in the next few days. I don't know if I'll get it done in 2 days. Probably not. So, there's that. I'll be back Tuesday and Wednesday with Tokyo Mirage. Thursday, I will do Throwback Thursday. And Friday, we'll basically be finishing the Book of Genesis on Friday. So we're doing a lot of wrapping up for stuff come December. And, when 2021 comes around, wow, it's weird to think 2021 is going to be a thing. When 2021 comes around, we'll be doing new projects and stuff like that. And I hope you guys will be sticking around for that. Of course, an ongoing thing. Depending how long it takes me to beat it, I will be playing Fire Emblem 1 on a Let's Play series on this channel as well. Episode 3 is up by the time I stream this. So I hope you guys will watch that as well. Anyways, you guys have a good day. Thank you for coming. And God bless.